Oh. Okay. I feel like I'm a judge.
Yeah.
The numbering of pages is a lifesaver on putting things in order. This was definitely a large packet. Well, and I was going back and forth with the last thing. I was going back and forth and all of a sudden I was like, hey, this paper is numbered.
Hi, everyone. This is Randy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Sorry, I was waiting for video to be enabled. So, but that's fine. I can see Puggy and Doug there. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Okay, so we're ready to begin. Let's call the meeting to order. It's 5:05 p.m. Thanks for your patience. Let's get roll call, starting with the people that are present in chambers, and then we'll dial it in from there.
Puggy Holmgren.
Douglas Stevens.
Oh, sorry, Puggy Holmgren.
It looks like we've got Lola. You're there, correct?
Yes, Lola Beetlebrox.
Perfect. That looks like Alan Long. Hi, Alan.
Yes, Alan Long.
Yeah, great. Jack, you're there?
I'm here.
Perfect. And this is Randy Scott. I don't think we have anyone else from the board that is in attendance. If so, please speak up. Alrighty. Happy March 1st, everybody. Let's move on through the agenda for approval of the minutes from last meeting. I wasn't there, and so I can't give any input, although they looked good.
I had no problem with them.
I didn't either.
Nor
Make
did
a
I.
motion to approve.
Alan with a motion to approve. Do we have a
A
second?
second.
Okay. Jack with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, opposed? All right, unanimous for those that can vote. Moving down to public communications. Do we have anyone from the public that needs the floor?
There is no one in chambers and no hands raised on Zoom.
All righty. Then moving forward to staff and board communications and disclosures. Outside of no, is there anything else to disclose? Anyone from staff have input or communications?
They're shaking their head no, Randy.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard that, but I wasn't sure. So, okay, we'll move on. Topic number 5, continuations, 336, 360 Daly Avenue. It looks like in the packet, the proposal is to continue to March 13th. Any other detail on that from staff that we need to talk about?
Nothing to really discuss at this point. This came before the board previously in, I believe it was November of 2022 for a work session. And there was a noticing mistake, so we've had to continue it to March 13th is what the proposed continuation date is.
Great. And it sounds like we'll have a quorum for that meeting based on the emails that were going around. So looks like we're just looking for a motion to continue 336, 360 Daly Avenue to March 13th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to continue.
Second.
Okay. All right, we've got Alan with the motion. Jack, was that you that seconded?
No.
Oh,
Actually, it was Doug that made the motion.
oh okay.
Sorry,
All
Randy.
right. Doug Stevens with the motion, Alan for the second. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, moving right along to the regular agenda for 2023 Historic District Grant Program. Take it away, Caitlin.
All right, thank you so much. Go ahead and get our full screen running here.
Nice.
All right, so again, this is one of our favorite events of the year when the city gets to award the annual Historic District grants for the local applicants who are looking for a little bit of financial assistance to get some preservation projects done. This came before the board for a work session last month as well, and we looked over the proposed projects and reviewed the grading rubric. And at that point, the members of the board opted to take the submittal or application materials individually and go look at the sites and review them on their own time, and then come back together for this meeting to go over the proposed awardees and the award amounts. So just as some general background information, the grant program was established in 1987, and since that time, the city has awarded tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to local historic preservation projects throughout the city. This is a 50-50 matching grant, so the property owner is required to outlay the onset project costs, and once it is completed, the city can reimburse up to 50% of those project costs when the work is all finished. This year, we have 8 applicants, and we have $100,506 available for funding. This amount of funding is intended to cover both the competitive grant program and the emergency grant program, which is discussed a little bit further in your packet. Overall, there is a total of $215,790 requested for these competitive grant applications this year. So the funding sources for these grant finances come from the general funds, the Main Street RDA, and the Lower Park Avenue RDA. So you can see on your screen, we have a table showing the amount of money available in each of those collective pots, as well as the amount of money that is requested in those areas. And as you can see, our demand does exceed the supply of funding available in all categories. This is a very, very competitive year. All right. Starting into our applications, we first have 690 and 698 Park Avenue. These buildings are landmark structures on the city's historic sites inventory, and the property owner is requesting $16,290 to replace the roofs on both structures. This is located in the Main Street RDA. Next, we have 1128 Park Avenue, which is also a landmark site. This is in the Lower Park Avenue RDA, and they are requesting a total of $113,000 for a variety of projects, which include repairing and restoring windows, repointing masonry, repairing and replacing the roof, exterior paint, upgrades to the mechanical and electrical systems, insulation, reconstructing porches, as well as restoring historic features. Next up, we have 22 Prospect, which is also a landmark historic site. They are requesting a total of $8,000 from the Main Street RDA so they can sand, prep, caulk, and paint the exterior, as well as repair and replace the fascia and trim on the house. Next, we have 40 Sampson, which is a significant historic site. They are requesting $15,000 from the general fund to prep, prime, paint, and stain exterior doors, screens, thresholds, deck railings, and a coal shed. We have 408 Main, which is the current building that the Business Roots is housed in. This is a significant site. They are requesting $15,000 for interior demolition, exterior closure, roofing, and electrical upgrades. Next is 517 Park Avenue. This is a landmark historic site. They're requesting $18,500 for historic material preservation and reconditioning, structural demolition, framing, finished carpentry, new windows, waterproofing, roofing, as well as interior and exterior paint. Second to last, we have a request for the Thanes Hoist House. This is a significant site. It is outside of the boundaries of both the Lower Park Avenue and the Main Street RDAs. So their funding source would be from the general fund. They are requesting that amount of money to facilitate the removal of some asbestos, TSI, as well as cleaning of some debris from within the building. And last but not least, we have the Silver King Hoist House, which is also a significant site. They are also requesting $15,000 to remove asbestos, TSI, and to facilitate some debris cleaning from within that structure. So I went through those pretty quickly. If the board members have any questions about those proposed projects or the amounts requested, I'm happy to go back through and chat about those. The next steps after the board makes their decisions for the awardees as well as the amounts awarded this evening will be to make a recommendation, to the City Council for final approval. This is currently scheduled for April 4th, 2023. And the reason that we are forwarding a recommendation to City Council is because a lot of these grant applications are asking for money in excess of $5,000, and anything over that amount does need to go to City Council for approval. So at this point in time, staff will turn the remainder of the time over to the board. In your packet, you did have an example percentage-based score from staff. These percentage-based scores were utilized in prior years to essentially determine the amount of funding to recommend for various grant applications. In prior meetings, the board members have identified some concerns with, I guess, the prorated or the percentage amounts of funding requested not necessarily covering all of the project. And the board had been receiving some comments from prior awardees saying that the amounts they received was really not significant to the project. So the board was interested in the possibility of awarding a full amount to those compelling projects. So staff will turn the time over to you, and I am here for questions.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, I mean, having read the minutes from the last meeting, I know there's a lot of really good discussion and then taking that to now individually scoring each one of these, it still comes up to question for me to just bring to the board for discussion. I guess I should, since this is kind of, it's not a work session, but do we need to open this up for public discussion? How do we organize the flow here, Caitlin?
It was not noticed as a public hearing, but by all means, if the board is interested in taking public comment, you're more than welcome to do that.
Okay.
We don't have anyone in chambers. We may have some people online over Zoom that may be interested in providing a little bit more information about these projects or asking questions. But if the board would like to open this up and have it be an item that the public can comment on, that's certainly something that you're welcome to do.
How does the board feel about that? Just giving some public input first, or do you want to have some discussion that could perhaps direct public comment? Give me your thoughts on the best way to go here, because I think there could be a fair amount of questions in terms of how we approach these.
Randy, this is Doug Stevens. Maybe if you'd like to open it up to public discussion after the board's had a chance to go through these projects, we may be able to answer some questions that anybody might be listening to on Zoom right now.
Okay, perfect. I like that. Anyone on the board opposed to that? Okay. All right. Well, for me, the question I've got that I'd like to just get the board's thoughts on is, I'm trying to think about, one, how do we address it this year, and how do we address some of these same things potentially next year? It looks like we've got, for lack of a better way to say, a decent amount of funding to spread around. It's not a lot, but it's a decent amount. And Doug, you had mentioned in the last meeting, I think it was you specifically, and I think it's consistent with another comment maybe even last year, when we've got a significantly or greater historic home that's looking for painting. They're not looking to bring back any potential historic features or anything like this. We're just looking for some help to paint. How do we address that when that could be potentially a maintenance ongoing thing for the homeowner as well, versus someone that potentially is bringing back some historic elements? How do we approach these something like this, or even a roof? We've got painting on one of these, and we have a new roof. It's a historic building, not a historic roof. We're just looking to re-roof it. I'd like to just engage that in discussion a little bit more so we can approach these effectively.
This is Puggy, and I have just a quick comment on that. Sometimes when they're applying for paint or a roof, sometimes it's truly a hardship. And I think you can look at it a little bit more closely. In theory, if you live in Park City and you live in Old Town, you can afford to do anything. But trust me when I tell you, you can't.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I think the new application form that we've talked about is it allows the applicant to dig into a little bit more reasoning behind it, just to give us some backstory as we think about going through the application. Right, we don't have the luxury of that for this one that I can see. So, how do we dig through that?
Well, it seems to me that the criteria and the scoring helps us to think about that when we're doing the scoring. And it would seem to me that we would want to see where everybody's scoring went to for each project, and maybe even get a average score for our group of each project, and see how that shook out.
Look to see where the key differences are, and if it's a wide difference, as we bring it up to discussion, and if we're relatively close, then that's what the board feels.
That would be my guess. Otherwise, why have a scoring card?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to do averages. I mean, I think I was probably really harsh when I look at the scores of what the city proposed, right? But when I look at like the city's rankings 1 through 7, mine came out in that identical order, right? Like, and so like in my mind, it's sort of clear if you can order them, like where the priorities fall and where the funds should flow. But that's just my opinion.
Mhm. Okay.
Randy, this is Doug Stevens. I agree somewhat. I think Peggy brought up a really good point. I think our role here is to protect the historic structures in our community. If somebody has the resources to maintain that building, and hopefully they do, then I don't think the city needs to step in with the grant program. If we're really trying to protect the historic homes, I'm sure there are situations that either would come through the emergency part of the grant program that's been brought up before, or through this process right here where somebody really to protect this home needs some financial assistance to do something like a roof or to paint it. And I'm not sure if that's part of the grant application program or if we even actually know that, or if we're just trying to understand what's the financial resources these applicants have in front of them.
Mhm.
Nor do I know if we legally ask for that.
Yeah, I think that's the clincher, but I also don't think that it was really part of the application this year. So I'm not really sure we should be talking about that as a criteria as we're trying to decide what our recommendation should be, because that really wasn't part of the application. And maybe that's something we want to consider changing going forward. And I think in the past, there's also talked about like whether or not they're residents or non-residents too. And I don't think that that was part of the application this year, even though they filled out their address. But as far as scoring and preferences, I don't think it was ever stated that we would preference one over the other.
And Jack, I agree with you. I didn't see anything in our application process this year, but I think it's something that maybe as we try to fine tune this for future grant applications, that might be helpful. And I think if nothing else, I think that's what this is this evening, is kind of a learning experience of how to fine tune this application so we don't have disappointed applicants. And we encourage grant applications and encourage.
Yeah. And so they would even know what to address and what we're looking for. I totally agree with you, Doug, on that. And sort of on that, like, I don't feel as though the applications in my mind were explicit enough about the historic pieces and whether or not they're using historic materials for replacements or not, right? Like I didn't feel like there was enough information on a lot of these applications to really understand whether or not they're going the full mile on preservation, or if they're just needing replacements, and that's kind of where they priced it out, right? Like, I don't think the descriptions of what they're doing were detailed enough in my mind.
Yeah. And even some of the cost structure was rounded to the nearest 5,000, it seemed like, or something. So yeah, I know, yeah, this is a learning opportunity for us. I looked through, like you had said, Jack, the rankings. I was off by just a couple. I just had some misordering near the bottom of the prioritization list. The top 4 were identical.
I mean, I will say in my mind, like, I think that applications would have been some of the ones I ranked on the lower end would have been a lot stronger if they had stripped out all the pieces that in my mind didn't have anything to do with the historic preservation of the property. Even though if you look at the application, it says including but not limited to. So we didn't really limit anything, right? Like, so you can put anything in there on a historic structure. But this is a historic grant. And so I think hopefully in the weighted rating system, the ones that are really addressing preservation issues should float to the top.
Right. On some of those that had, 8 line items, I was going in the weeds, even going through this, thinking about of each 8 line items. I'm going to take each line item and take it through the criteria on which one we would spend money on.
I was like, do I have a line item veto here? It's like,
right. So yeah, this is a learning curve that we're all in. Okay. I still don't know the best way to approach this in terms of the next step. Do we see if we're aligned on the priorities and then go from there and look at some average scoring of the priorities? I don't know the best way.
And I think that there is one other subject that maybe we should talk about for a minute. When I look at the way that the city had done it, right? Like they were still looking and willing to fund partially depending on your score, right? And I don't know if that's really the way it should be done. Like if you have a really strong proposal for preservation, restoration work, or maintenance work that needs to get done, like, and you're the top applicant in the pool, like why wouldn't we fund all of what you're asking for? We're not funding the full thing. This is a 50% match. So it's not like we're paying for the preservation work entirely. But if it's a 50% match on projects that scored really well, why wouldn't we give them everything that they're asking for? I guess
I kind of agree with Jack on this. It seemed like the scoring, how it was done last year and taking averages, and it wasn't just what the score was, but it was also the dollar volume of what they were asking for and the size of the project, when maybe we really weren't concerned about funding that part of the project anyway. So my sense is we don't proceed down that road again this year, that we get back to priorities. And as Jack just brought up, if we feel really strongly that this is a good project, and why wouldn't we just fund the 100% of it? And I think after tonight, we'll have a much better idea, of what the board is looking for as far as what projects and or what part of a project really is that we're looking for in the grant process. And I can't overemphasize enough, when we started this process 3 or 4 years ago, trying to get this grant program back up and running again, part of it was to give the planning department the opportunity to have some incentives available to help fund historic restoration, and doing that extra mile. So for example, if somebody wanted to put on a new roof and they're just replacing what is an existing non-complying roof or non-conforming roof, that's say asphalt shingles, why wouldn't we, as in the grant process, help fund a more historically accurate fire retardant cedar shingle roof that would have been consistent on the home at that time? That, I think, and really start to limit our grant application process and what we're asking for to things that really the planning department's trying to deal with day in and day out on the exterior of the house. They're never fighting an applicant over, what kind of mechanical system they're using. I think we're kind of past that stage now, but I'm sure they're still fighting them over windows and trim and doors and things like that, and porches. And if we could help out through this grant process, I think that would be beneficial. And I think the other caveat to that is that if this is something that the community can see and city council can see, because it's the exterior that we're dealing with, I think we've got a better argument for increased funding for the grant program.
I agree.
Yeah, good points, Doug. Because also, what happens this year can, we can leave a little bit of a leak in the program that goes to next year. So perhaps one way to do this is just go through each project and say, is it preservation worthy? Are there items that are truly looking toward preservation of either going back in time, like you had mentioned on a roof, going to something that takes it back in history a moment, versus just replacement, and ranking it according to, the level of preservation that's important to the group.
Randy, maybe if we go back to what Jack was suggesting, is maybe between all of us, we might find that we're maybe for the first 3 or 4 or 5 applicants, top applicants, we might all be in agreement on that. And maybe we just start with what we think are the top applicants and work our way down. And then I think we're going to need some kind of insight from the planning department and what they're going to want to have as an emergency fund. So we kind of, from there, we know as we get through these top applicants, whether or not we want to fund them fully or not, will give us an idea of what's left by the time we get down to the latter applicants and what the planning department feels like it still needs.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
And somehow we're going to need a little more guidance as to which bucket of funds these come out of, right? Like, I mean, the Thanes and the Silver King host houses, those are clearly general fund. And I think general fund was what, 38,000, but the total of those two is 30. So that works. But so something else is obviously part of the general fund if there's 45,000 that was requested. And I'm not sure what that is, but
It's 40 Sampson.
40 Simpson was also general. Okay.
40 Sampson is general fund, and Thanes and Silver King are the general fund.
Okay.
So I like your idea of coming up with the top 5. And so if you wanted to go through everybody and have them come up with their top 5 and have a recorder do that, we can figure out where we are if we're all, thinking the same.
Can I just ask one question about one project? And that's on 408 Main. They were asking for $15,000 for demolition and exterior closure. What's exterior closure? I
think exterior closure, they're doing some tenant improvements on the interior of it. So I believe that it is securing the building, and then they are also installing a new front door.
Oh, okay. Is the new front door, this is the Roots building, is it more historic than what's there now? Or is it just because they subdivided the space?
It's the same as it's the same design as the door they have now.
Is there any reason why we can't give one applicant more than they requested, as long as they're within the 50%?
That's a fantastic question. And in prior years, the board has supported that $15,000 maximum award. However, in recent years, the board's indicated that maybe that's something that you want to move away from. However, to get back to your question, it is always in the board's power to award more than what is requested.
Because it did seem to me like some of the applicants only requested 15,000 because the assumption was that's all they could get was a maximum. But was that part of the grant application process? I can't remember that it was limited to 15.
Yeah, I believe in the application form it did say that there was a $15,000 limit.
Oh, it did? Okay. Because also somewhere in there it talks about if you awardees of over 25,000 having to put a facade easement. So then those two are sort of in conflict then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So in prior years, the awards cap has been at $15,000. However, the board has, again, in prior years, awarded more money than was asked for and more money than was at that $15,000 cap. I believe it's somewhat rare for us to do a facade easement, but again, it is in the board's power to award more if you decide that it is a meritorious project.
That's going back way before your time, probably before you started planning, but there was occasionally in the early days grant program, they did 25,000, and I can remember even one year they did a $50,000 grant. Yeah, and those all required facade easements at that point.
So do we want to just start talking about top 5s at this point?
I think it makes sense, don't you? Can we just record it
Mm-hmm.
and see if we're consistent? and the top five, it would be among all of them, regardless of if they're in the historic district and coming from the funds or from the general fund, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's, yep.
Yep. Okay, you want to go in order of how we normally do, sitting in chambers?
Good idea.
Don't start with me because I wasn't expecting this. I've got notes all over the place.
Okay.
I mean, I'm like, I have
Okay.
comments about how the applications were filled out even.
Okay, then I'll go.
Yep.
My top three that got 15 points each were Thames, Silver King, and 517 Park Avenue.
Okay.
And then the next one was 1128 Park Avenue, got 13 points. But I should tell you that I only looked at the historic items on that list. So that included repairing, restoring windows, painting the exterior, reconstructing porches, and restoring historic features, which ended up being 42,000. I just looked at those items when I gave it that 13. And then the next one was 22 Prospect.
So when you say 42, just for clarification, Lola, is that the city portion or is it the total and the city portion would be 21?
That would be the owner's portion or the city's portion, yes, would be
Okay.
42,000, yes. And then, so you did hear me that the next one was 22 Prospect,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Yep. Okay. Doug, where did you line up on these?
In the top three spots, just together, were the Thames, Silver King, and 517 Park. In my second spot, I had 1128 Park and 22 Prospect. And after that, I was kind of neutral on what was left, although I was not I didn't think 698 Park, just redoing a roof with another asphalt roof, was warranting any funds. I had that in the 8th place.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Mine in order were all similar, with Silver King, Thames, 517 Park, 1128 Park, and 22 Prospect. I actually had 22 Prospect tied with Sampson. And then, like you, Doug, I actually had 0 for 690 and 698 Park. So I just didn't think replacing a asphalt shingle roof with another one was worthy of preservation funds. Jack.
Yeah, so I think we've got a consistent theme going on here. I had Thames, Silver King, 517, 1128, and 22 Prospect. Those were the order of my top 5.
Okay.
Although I did give points to 690 and 698, but only like 2 points.
I also gave 40 Sampson 11 and 22 Prospect 12. So yeah. So I thought they were all good projects.
Huggy, how are those notes coming?
Thames, Silver King, 22 Prospect, 1128 Park, and 517.
In that order?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we've got consensus among those.
What about Alan?
Oh, wait, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, Alan. I didn't see on my screen.
Sorry, Silver King first, Thames second, Park third,
Which Park Avenue?
517 Park, 1128 Park fourth, and 22 Prospect fifth.
So it sounds like the top 5 was the same for everybody, or did I miswrite that down?
Nope. I think the only adjustment we had was in Puggy's, the order of the last 2 were different, or the last 3 was different, but the top 5 are the same among everyone.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit in alignment with Lola on the funding of 1128 Park. Like, as I sort of jokingly said before, I'd love a line item veto on that one. Like, yeah, I would like to make it the city's portion 50% of the historic preservation items on the list.
Only 50%?
Well, that's the ruling, right? Like, the city funds 50% of the estimates on, right? I mean, up to 50%, right? So it's sort of the same that you were talking about, Lola.
Right.
So just to clarify, that would be 42,000 for the windows, the paint, porch, and architectural feature reconstruction.
Right. I would see that as the max allowable there. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
I would agree with that.
Me too.
Was someone speaking? It just broke away a little bit. I heard something, but wasn't clear. No.
So, Caitlin, if we're going to fund all of those in those top 5 that they've asked for or allowable for, what's remaining in each one of the buckets?
Let me go ahead and calculate that really quick. All right, so with a swift kind of a napkin calculation for the Lower Park Avenue RDA, that would still leave a deficit of $3,400. For the general funds, that would leave a remainder of $8,736. And for the Main Street RDA, we would still have a shortfall of about $3,500 to do a full award for all 5.
Would you mind
Okay.
pulling up the screen again that had the different funds on them? So we can maybe.
So we could take the 8,000 out of the general fund and distribute it to cover the deficits in the lower Park Avenue and the Main Street, correct?
Correct. You can move funding from the general funds to the 2 RDAs. You just can't move funding from the RDAs around.
Correct. Okay. So we could fund them all
Yes,
and basically have just $1,000 left.
correct.
But then you need a contingency for the year.
That would
But they-
leave roughly $1,000 in the emergency fund. That's correct.
And that's to cover just between now and the end of June, right?
And-
Because the next year starts in July.
Mm-hmm.
hmm
Yeah.
July
Yes.
1, yeah.
They're nodding yes.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
But that contingency does need to come out of the general fund unless the emergency happens to be in a Main Street RDA or a lower Park Avenue RDA.
Correct. And if
Correct.
there's funding available, otherwise it still would come out of the general fund.
Well, you had put $10,000 in your emergency pot, Caitlin, in your hypothetical that you put in the packet. So I'm just wondering if you think that between now and July, you think it needs to be $10,000.
That's an excellent question. And the $10,000 is really just a placeholder. Luckily, knock on wood, it won't happen, but we've not had a request for emergency grant funding for historic structures. So luckily, we have not had the need for funding reservation there. So that's simply just an example number.
Yeah.
It was a generous number.
Yes.
For me, when I looked at 22 Prospect, I thought that was kind of an emergency. There's all sorts of things there that are going wrong over the course of several years that need to be repaired in order for the exterior of it to be done. And so my thought was that 22 Prospect is definitely something that needs to be done even on an emergency basis, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Which fund does 22 Prospect come out of?
I believe
Maine.
that one is in Main Street.
Street.
Yes, Main Street.
And 40 Sampson comes out of the general fund. So if
But I
we
don't
wanted to,
think that's one of the top 5s, right?
no, it is not, but it was
Right.
very close to 22's Prospect.
Yeah, on my score it was as well. It's similar in approach as well. So I'd like us to discuss that one a little bit.
But I guess my point about that one was that, if you didn't fully fund Thanes and Silver King, you could award at least something to 40 Sampson.
I kind of felt like 40 Sampson was just a pain in a dress, whereas like 22 Prospect, there was definitely some deferred maintenance that definitely needed addressing. And I didn't get out of this application that there's some significant deterioration that needed to be addressed. It was just a exterior paint job and screens and doors. So I didn't score it very well.
I was in agreement with Jack on that one also.
That's
Mm.
one too that I looked at the application and they had like a big arrow to total amounts and rather than breaking it down like everybody else did. And I just thought that was
Kind of weird.
everybody else gave really detailed breakdown on what was going to cost what. And this was just a blanket arrow that said city 30,000, us whatever it was. I've got it right here. Sorry.
Okay.
But I just thought it was, throw together application, 30, 15 for the city and 15 for the grant.
Okay. Fair points.
And 517 Park Avenue, is that in Main Street, RDA?
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this one we really, I don't know if it was fair or unfair, but we really understood what it was they were doing because it had come before us, right? Like, and so I felt like I knew this and the reasons for what needed to get done here better.
Yes, I had emailed Caitlin. I'll bring this up now because I felt that on the score sheet, the historic features, proposed design and scope of work uses best practices for the treatment of historic materials. And you can really tell in 517 Park that was the case and had been before us before. And of course, with Thanes and Silver King, they really know what they're doing. But we didn't really ask in the application for the details on the best practices. So I felt that most of the applications were at a disadvantage because the application doesn't particularly ask for that detail.
Yeah.
Right. And we also knew more about 1128 Park too. So it's interesting that those four ended up scoring the best, right?
Right. Yep. Agreed.
So we're learning.
Yeah. And the only other comment to note as we think about, moving general fund money around and having some sort of a reserve. It sounds like we haven't had to dip into this as of late. The only thing that's on my mind right now is we've got record amounts of snowfall and historic
right.
structures typically don't do well with those unless they're occupied and have heat in them. So the likelihood of us having emergency funds, need to become available is probably higher than any previous year in a long time.
Yeah. So maybe do we recommend a cut to the allowable for 1128 Park simply because it's so much more than the rest of the ones that we're funding, right? The rest of them are, 15 to 20, right? And that's double that.
Well, I had calculated using Caitlin's, idea of taking the, 13 over 17 and then making a decimal and multiplying it by 42,000. And I had come up with 32,130 using that methodology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think my scoring was a little harsher than everyone else's, right? Like, so if you did that, everything would be like $5, but I only had one that wasn't in the single digits. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, the mathematical scoring is skewed based on the $113,000. So I don't think we can even really look at that. In that case, all we're doing is putting future applicants to take and put in as big a dollars as they can and only ask for a little bit.
Yeah.
I went about it another route. I just went with the $15,000 route for the first four applicants, and that came to $60,000. And then argue and just come up between the committee here what we want to do next after that with the last or with the last one applicant or two, but then also be looking at it in terms of really the contingency fund being an applicant and how do we take and split that up based on what funds are available in each RDA and the general fund. And I think Brandy's brought up a good point. This might be a year where we don't see anything emergencies right now, but maybe by April we will, or May. And the other question I had for funding and how funding works within municipalities, and I've asked this before and I apologize for not remembering, but do we lose that general fund money in the next budget process because it wasn't spent?
Yep.
So could we take and do a contingency where we award this if we don't have an emergency for this $10,000? We could say give an extra $5,000 each to the two hoist house.
Yeah, like come May, we
So
can
that
go
Yeah.
back and like reallocate or award some of these others that we haven't, right?
I
sort
think when
of-
you look at the budgeting process within a city, if you don't spend it, then they think you don't need it.
Right.
And
And
we
we can't
won't
overspend
get
right
as much
now.
last year. We'll be on a downward spiral every year as we're trying to be prudent by having some money available.
Yeah.
But if we could come back and address that later on, I don't know how we do that, but I think Jack's brought up a good point there too.
I mean, I think we could do that. It just might get a little tight. If we don't spend it, it does go away, but it doesn't penalize us for the next year. We'll be awarded the same amount next year.
Okay. But wouldn't we like more for next year
Mm-hmm.
than all this
There's-
year?
Definitely a need.
There's definitely a need.
There's definitely a need. Yeah. I guess we could do that. I think we just want to be very clear of where those funds are going. So when we get to a certain point and we know we don't have any emergencies, that we can move quickly to allocate those funds.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so it shouldn't be a certain percentage off of 5 projects. That just complicates things, you know?
Right. And I don't want to have to come back to you all to make that decision and then
Right.
possibly miss our window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And
Well,
what
I guess what I was saying earlier too, before all this was just was possibly awarding a lot of the same amount of money to the first 3 or 4 applicants, rather than trying to figure out, well, does this person deserve $1,000 more, $1,000 less? But
So maybe right now we hold off on allocating the remainder of the general funds, the $8,000 there. And then and possibly awarding more of that later. And then whichever applicant scored the lowest from the Lower Park Avenue and Main Street, those get cut by the $3,500 that each one of those are short for now, and then reallocate more to them later, perhaps.
well, I think part of the problem I'm having is that when you look at how much fund is available in, where is it? Lower Park Avenue has 38 general fund, 38.
I mean, Lower Park Avenue
I
is
wasn't
this
that-
one
it
project,
wasn't-
right?
Yeah, I think the 1128 Park Avenue is a good project. I'm not sure it's a better project than the 2 hoist houses.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah,
Right.
so I'm awarding more to 1128 Park over the 2 general fund projects.
Yeah, so
But
maybe
on-
we don't.
But on the other hand, I mean, that particular property at 1128 Park has been really neglected over time and is in very bad shape and it's on Park Avenue. It's a very good project.
And it's a really old one too, if I recall, right? 1890s.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely something worth saving. It's one of the oldest houses in town.
And the Thanes and Silver King, they're going to come back to us because this is just the start of what they're doing.
They need millions,
Yeah.
right? So yeah.
And all that really can be accomplished in 2023 is the asbestos abatement. They're going to do that. And
Right. And I think
Fill
they
them
need
up.
to do that first in order to go after other funding. So
correct.
I have another fund accounting question. Sorry. So the Main Street RDA and the Lower Park Avenue RDA, they're separate entities outside of the PCM, Park City Municipal Corp. So do we lose those funds in the budgeting process? Because they're not actually part of the budget, are they, for the city?
They are part of the budget. They are just separate accounts within the city's overall budget. And the funding that's allocated to those is intended to go into the betterment of those specific areas.
Through tax increments from a redevelopment agency. So
That's right.
So, I mean, don't those funds just carry over to the next year then without going through, because it is a separate RDA, whereas the general fund is the one that it gets voted on every year. Am I missing my fund accounting here, or?
I'm not sure I have the answer to that. I believe Mark's online. He might know. But we could find that out for you.
Well, what it is it's we're trying to figure out how to save how to keep money in here, and for this contingency, at the same time not lose it.
Yeah, I think you're better. This is Mark. I think you're better off asking budget and finance for the specifics. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, thanks, Mark. My understanding is that the RDA money just carries over into those funds. They're tax increment funds from increases in property taxes. And I also recall that when we started this program a long time ago, that there was a lot of money in the Lower Park Avenue RDA because they kept carrying over. My recollection may be wrong, but whereas the general fund is just that, the general fund.
But wouldn't emergency funds, if needed, have to be in that RDA too, if you're going to hold that back?
Yes. So if emergency came up and it happened to be in Lower Park Avenue or Main Street, then one of those two funds could be used
to cover
for
it. So
yeah,
I guess,
yeah.
I mean, with like, I don't know, with 2/3 of the year already gone, like, I mean, if we're trying to reserve funds for emergency, wouldn't it make more sense to just have it in the general fund so that we could fund an emergency anywhere outside of the RDAs or wherever it's needed, right? Like,
yeah, no, you're probably right. It's less restricted.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if you're trying, I know you're trying to sort of say, if we don't spend it, it's going to roll over. But like, if you save it, like what are the chances that the emergency comes in is going to be in that RDA? It's probably not very likely, given how few emergency requests we have ever seen.
I think what I'm hearing for you, if I'm just going to sum it up, is that ideally what we would like is to have a 10,000 emergency fund that doesn't get touched, that we don't have to think about when we're awarding, and that would just carry over year after year. Is that correct? So that we don't have to blend it in with this? Is that what I'm kind of hearing from you? That if we had sort of 10,000 set aside?
No, I think unfortunately right now we have to live with these pools of funds that we have. And I think Jack's brought up the point, and rightfully so, is that the general fund is the fund that's it's the easiest one to use anywhere within the historic district without any restraints on it. But I
think I agree with what Gretchen just said, though. Like, let's just say next year, if the city were going to allocate funds, right? Like, and maybe they could come up with 110,000 or whatever it is, right? An additional 10,000, and have the emergency fund just be for emergency funding. And we don't ever have to worry about that when allocating funds for the grant, that it's always there. And if it's not needed, it rolls over. If it's needed, it gets spent. And maybe that becomes a different line item in the city budget.
Yeah, that would make sense.
It's an assumption that the funding is then raised by that emergency fund amount of 10 grand though, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that's what we have available for emergency funding, right? Like, and seeing that we've never had an application for it, then that seems sufficient right now, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
So maybe
And if
just,
emergency comes in before we've allocated funds, then we obviously can use some of these too, right? It's just coming towards the end of the year and allocating this grant. Like, we want to be able to allocate as much as we can. So it sort of helps our allocation process if we know we can just allocate all of this and still have reserved 10 grand for the remaining quarter of the year.
Yep, agreed.
so maybe with that in mind, how about just to get the ball rolling here in the general fund, because both those, the two hoist, the applications for Thanes and Silver King were both in the general fund, both asking for 15 each. What if we did really fully fund both of those, put 30,000 and left 8,736 as a contingency? And then you'd have that left over, before the end of the budget cycle, that tonight we could still tell you where we think that should be allocated to. So you could go ahead and do that. If that's not spent, then hopefully in the budgeting process, the planning department can request a $10,000 emergency fund that we can take out of this grant process.
That's great. I like it.
Is that?
Yep, I like it too.
So
Yeah.
I like that.
That would
Me
get
too.
the first two out of the way, and then we can move on to 3 and 4 or something.
Yep.
But with what I was also trying to come up with, we don't have to fund. I don't believe we're going to lose the RDA money. I wish we had an answer to that right now.
Well, I think we can also spend it all, so I'm not too worried about it.
Right. I mean, as it is right now, we're -3, essentially $3,000 or more in each with the 5 we've chosen, right?
Right, they're
Mhm.
about 3,400 to 3,500 below.
So the only project in the lower Park Avenue RDA is the 1128 Park Avenue.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess the question there is, do we award them the 38.6 or do we even cut that down to like 35 and reserve some there too, right? Like,
I think we reward them the 38.6.
yeah, I do too, but
I do too. That's a very visible.
and it's not the full 42 but it's easy enough to be like, well, that's all the funds that we have available in your RDA and you're getting them all, right? Like, so.
Yep. Yep, I think that one's clean.
Yeah, I agree.
Will you be doing a facade easement at 38.6?
I think we
it's
will. Yeah.
required, right? Over 25
25.
according to the,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great location for a big sign saying how wonderful our grant program is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is true. They did used to take and put a sign up on the
Yeah.
homes.
Mhm.
But I guess I forgot all about that.
Do we need to pull the $1,000 out of that for a customer sign? Yeah.
By the way,
Um,
folks responsible for the sign we made.
Okay, so then we're down to 517 Park and 22 Prospect, right?
That's right.
Correct.
and those are both in the Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
And we only have 23,000 there.
That's right. We only have 23,000 in the Main Street. And let's see.
And how much were we looking for 517 Park?
517 is asking for 18,500.
18.
18.5,
Right.
and 22 Prospect was
8,000. 8,000.
They were asking for, this is Doug Stevens, they were asking for a full 8, but part of it was repainting the house and then part of it was restoration. So if we wanted to take and do 18.5 on 517 Park, and then the balance, what's available in the Main Street RDA, which is 23,170, and use that for 22 Prospect. That was how I was approaching it.
I'm fine with that. I mean, 517 scored better anyways. So
Yep.
Same with me.
And that, you're right, that value kind of really addresses some of the preservation that they were looking at, right? So
Right.
I like that. That's clean too.
Works for me.
2,
So how much have we spent now?
We're not even.
$250,000.
We spent all but 8,736, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should be.
Correct. All right, so just to clarify and make sure that I'm keeping as accurate notes as possible. So the board is looking to fully fund the $18,500 request for 517 Park and to utilize the remainder of the Main Street RDA funding for 22 Prospect, which would be $4,670. Am I correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. We don't necessarily need to sum this up in a motion or anything. This is more
Because
like
this is just a
work session, correct?
recommendation, right, to council?
Yep.
I do think if I heard Gretchen correctly, the 8,736 that wasn't being spent in the general fund that we would lose at the end of the fiscal year. I think we need to give some direction on that. Is that correct? So you can just handle it administratively. My suggestion would be to give it to the 2 hoist projects. I think they only requested 15,000 because that's historically all we've been doing. And that
Right.
was a project that was costing a lot more than that, that will be significantly seen by a lot of people in the community.
I like that idea of giving the hoist the additional monies.
I don't object either. I think that's a good use.
Yep. I think it's easy to administrate also.
Provided that that's what's left
Mm-hmm.
in June, right?
Mhm.
Right. I have no problem with that.
And I guess just for clarification, if something does come up, whatever is left, just split it 50-50 between the 2 projects.
Yep.
Okay.
It's the most money I've spent and I'm not driving it or wearing it.
Mhm. Mark, I'm just seeing your note. You recommend we should forward the recommendation by motion. So we per
So like make a recommendation to so we're making a motion to make a recommendation to council to fund X, Y, and Z in these amounts. Is that generally what Mark is suggesting?
Correct.
Would the board like me to read the finalized amounts and the awardee addresses into the record so that you can just
so
have
moved.
that in the
Yeah,
motion? All
please.
right. All right. For the Silver King Hoist House, the board makes a recommendation to fully fund the request for $15,000. For the Thanes Mine Hoist House, the board makes a recommendation to fully fund the request for $15,000. The board makes a recommendation to award funding in the amount of $38,600 to 1128 Park Avenue. The board makes a recommendation to fully fund the request for $18,500 for 517 Park Avenue. And makes a recommendation that the council award an amount of $4,670 to 22 Prospect. And this would leave $8,736 in a contingency fund, which is to be split evenly among the Silver King Coalition Hoist House and the Thanes Mine Hoist House in the event that it is not spent in an emergency grant application.
God, that's perfect.
Sounds correct.
So I'll make a motion that we recommend that those funding amounts that Caitlin has just nicely outlined for us to council.
I'll second. That was
Jack.
Lola.
Okay. Jack with the motion, Lola with the second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay. Excellent. Thanks for all the homework that everyone did on this to make this as smooth as possible for getting this grant application process up and running.
Can I ask if we should have a little work session while our minds are clear on some of the things that we're worried about for next year, maybe at the next meeting?
Yeah, I like
To
just
do that at,
for clarity of
May, is that-
applications, right?
I guess, April. Is that what you're saying, Lola?
Yeah, April. Just a little work session to work on a couple of the concerns we had.
Yeah, we can absolutely arrange that.
And perhaps just one idea, just since this is fresh, if we can all just in the next week submit some of our thoughts to Caitlin, and they can just be summarized then while they're still fresh, and they can be part of a packet that then we can see everybody's thoughts and come really prepared to discuss it in
That
April.
would be hugely helpful.
That might be more effective, you know?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. And just a reminder to the members of the board, this will be going to the city council for their final action on April 4th. And if you would like to attend that meeting, we would be more than delighted to have you.
Okay.
And also, Caitlin, just I think as a thought to everyone, this is our recommendation to council, doesn't mean it has been approved. And so should we consider it essentially confidential until the council meeting?
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, except this is a public meeting, but yeah, sure.
Right. I guess you're right. Right.
Move to
Yeah.
adjourn.
Leave
Second.
Jack to bring out the obvious, right?
All right. Yeah. Okay. Good enough. I think I heard Lola with a move to adjourn.
Buggy did.
Oh, Buggy. Yeah.
Second.
I second.
Okay. I don't know who got the second first.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Okay. Have a good
Good
evening.
night.
Bye.
Thank you.